Welcome to another episode of Growth Marketers Podcast. I am Solomon Timothy.
And I am Taylor Rowe. Today's episode was all about how you can leverage what we call thought leadership or thought leadership style content creation to generate demand and build brand awareness, and really brand affinity is what we're looking for, is becoming synonymous, and becoming known as an industry leader, as a thought leader in whatever your particular industry is. So hopefully you guys find this episode enjoyable and find some actionable insights into building a true brand and building thought leadership in your industry. As always, if you like the podcast, give us a like, subscribe. Whatever platform you're watching or listening on, definitely hit that subscribe button for more episodes. Enjoy.
All right, Taylor. So today, what I want to touch on is how do brands create demand, right? We talked to a lot of clients that maybe are starting a new line of business, breaking into a new industry they've never done before. And they would ask us, well, how do we create demand? Because they don't know that we do the service. So I want to break down that topic a little bit and talk about different ways to generate demand for a brand. Mm-hmm. Does that sound like a good topic?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's been a lot of talk about demand generation lately. And we talk about it all the time. And I think important distinction to make when we talk about demand generation, we're not talking about lead generation, right? And so we've made a podcast in the past. If you haven't listened to that, demand generation versus lead generation, I would recommend go back and listen to that first, because now what we want to talk about is, okay, we've established what demand generation is. We're kind of simultaneously building, I guess you'd call it product awareness or market awareness and product consideration at the same time, right? So if that's what we're doing, then how do we go about doing that? And so really one of the best ways to actually generate demand is through a process that we call thought leadership, or building thought leadership, positioning yourself, your brand, your company as a thought leader. So that's what I want to dive in today is, how do we actually leverage thought leadership to generate demand for our product or service?
No, I think it's probably the easiest way to do it. You just tie yourself to a cause and it's something that you want to be an expert in. But for those that might not know what thought leadership is, can you give a quick breakdown and we can dive deeper into it?
Yeah. So, thought leadership is really, in general, it's kind of an inherent component to marketing, because the idea is that you are the one educating your market, right? And so if you're the one educating your market, then you are marketing to them. So thought leadership in my mind is positioning yourself in the way that you are the educator, and you're consistently educating your market with value-based educational content in really multiple different formats and multiple different channels. And so the more that you can do that, the more you position yourself as the go-to resource for that industry. That's truly becoming a thought leader. If you're a thought leader in the industry, right, you're the one putting out new ideas. If you think about just the definition of thought leadership, is you're leading the discussion, you're leading the conversation around something in your industry. And it doesn't always have to be innovative. And I think that's something that brands and companies struggle with when they think about thought leadership, is like, I have to say something that is
no one's ever heard before.
Yeah, and it's got to be innovative, and everything that I say is going to be like this grandiose type. It really doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be that way, right? Like, you just have to educate your customer, your consumer, about the right way to go about doing your whatever it is, the problem that you're solving, right? So there's a lot of different formats, like you mentioned, of thought leadership, how that can happen and how you can make that happen, how you can position yourself or your company as an industry leader, as a thought leader. But it ultimately always comes down to, are you educating your customer? Are you providing valuable content on a consistent basis?
Certainly. And I think that's, a lot of people think that, like you said, they have to be some sort of new idea, something no one's ever heard. And it's some fear internally that says, well, I may not be able to be a thought leader, so therefore I can't generate any demand and I'm not going to be a leader in my industry. And I think they're letting go of so many things rather than saying, you know what, I've been in this space for so many years. I know what the industry needs and I'm going to talk about it, right?
Yep.
So like recently, I think a couple of years ago when ABM was becoming popular, there was a lot of thought leaders about ABM is the way to go, and just makes perfect sense. And I think we had thought leaders in early days of SEO, and now we have thought leaders in chatbot, thought leaders in anything that's emerging. There's someone who is like leading the pack.
Right.
What do you think someone has to do to use that before they can even, generate demand, or how does that process look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to just talk about what you know, right? I mean, you can't just, again, not everything has to be cutting edge and innovative. So don't go too far outside of your lane, so to speak, of things that you don't really know. Just talk about the things that you know really well. It's probably what you do for your job anyways, right? If you're an executive at an organization, you're in sales department, marketing department, whatever it is, you explain to customers what you do on the phone or in person all the time. And so the thing is just, can we get more into detail? Can we explain these things at scale?
Yeah.
So then the second question is how do we get that content out there? Because in order to be a thought leader, you can have great ideas, and if nobody hears them, then you're not a thought leader. So I think for this podcast, I think it'd be great to just give our listeners some examples of ways that they can become a thought leader and easy ways to do that. I think what we're doing right now is one of the easiest and most accessible ways that, in order to become a thought leader it's ever been, is creating your own podcast. If you have things to say and you want to have a voice and no one's going to give you a platform, then make your own platform, right? And so your own podcast, YouTube channel is a great way to start. I think a couple of, quick wins that you could do to gain some thought leadership would be to piggyback on someone else's brand or someone else's awareness. So if you are, you feel like you have an expertise in some area, I would then invite other thought leaders that have some influence in their respective space that is related to your industry. Invite those people onto your podcast or try to be a guest on their podcast. And if you could do that, 4, 5, 10, 20 times, however many it's going to take, I think that will quickly, kind of exponentially grow your reach by piggybacking on someone else's reach if you don't have a following already.
Yeah. And like you said, there's not a lot of work to start a YouTube channel or a podcast. Everything is free. It takes time.
Yeah.
And if you're passionate about it, you're determined to create an audience, to be a thought leader, there's not a better place. And there's tons of eyeballs, right? There's tons of people consuming content. So if you have been thinking about that, I would say that would be a good place to start if you want to build it, or a Facebook group, something where you are the one that's controlling the conversation.
Yep. So a couple other areas where I think you can easily build thought leadership, LinkedIn, just organically posting on LinkedIn. Again, you can just type it out. You can use your own knowledge to create industry graphics and insights, statistics, anything like that. Anything of value that you can share and educate your audience. I would do that and just consistently post on LinkedIn. I think that's one way you can build a following and leverage still a pretty underutilized platform in LinkedIn's organic reach. So LinkedIn would be a great place. And if you want to combine some of those strategies, you can take the podcasts or the YouTube videos that you're creating, chop them up into smaller pieces, and just extract one section from that and post it on a channel like LinkedIn. And then same thing of, hey, if you interviewed someone else who's an industry leader or a thought leader in a similar industry or has a similar audience, you interview them or you pose a question to them, tag them in the LinkedIn post, try to get their feedback, which ultimately would expand and extend your reach. So those are some ways that I would try to build thought leadership, but it comes down to the value of that content. You have to have something to say, which again, it doesn't have to be innovative or profound. Everything out of your mouth doesn't have to be this profound statement that is going to make people scratch their head and be like, oh my gosh, this guy's a genius. But it has to be valuable. You can't just say things that people already know as well. So you have to reinstate some of the things that they do already know, but at the same time, give them something of value and give them a reason to keep coming back, right? If you think about the example of a YouTube page, if you have a bunch of videos on YouTube that people already knew, there's no reason they would subscribe to those videos and ever come back and watch another video, right? So if you think about my goal with this video is to get them to watch the next video, then that would start changing the way that you think about what type of content would be interesting.
Yeah, and I think you have to really carve out your niche. That would be one thing that I would say, because you can't be a thought leader in everything.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it goes back to the beginning of talk about what you know. And you can't, Yeah, you can't be a jack of all trades or something like that.
There's very few Elon Musks out there.
Right. Well, I mean, even that, it takes some time to build up that clout and that credibility to be able to talk about something else, right? So people still say those kind of things, stay in your lane.
I certainly think that if you are, again, trying to create a podcast, this is very much a marketing podcast. And that's the thing that we talk about. If our YouTube channel is about marketing, it's about content marketing, it's about inbound marketing. And we're not talking about something completely different. So you can change that niche, but really figure out what do you want to be an expert in? Even if you are experts in multiple things, what do you want to be known for? What's that legacy that you want to build? And then work backwards. Say, I want to be really good at this thing. Personally, I like creating content about entrepreneurship, so that's my thing. I love marketing, but entrepreneurship, I think it's bigger than that. You know what I'm saying? Marketing is a component. So you got to figure out where is that and then work on, building an audience around that, which again takes a lot of time. But once you build that, the audience will be there.
Yeah, along those lines of building an audience, I know one of the things we do for our clients a lot is a process which we call digital PR. So do you want to kind of describe that process of how we go about digital PR and how that positions you as a thought leader, or what that means in relation to thought leadership?
Absolutely. And I think that digital PR service it's been evolving because of the way our content consumption has been evolving, right? So there used to be a time where we would work on getting published on, online publications. So our team would reach out and we would email different publications, say, hey, my client over here is an expert in this, medical field. You guys have an amazing publication. He's got this amazing idea of what, where the industry is going. Would you be open to publishing? We'll do the outreach. We'll come up with titles and abstracts of potential content, build those connections and get some positive replies, create the content, submit to them, handhold that editor until the publication is live. And that entire process from ideation to actual execution is what we call digital PR, right? Get published in places where your audience are hanging out and they see your name associated with public, whatever journals that is. And then now they're like, hey, you know what? Taylor knows whatever the industry. So kitchen remodeling weekly, look, he's published.
Right. Yeah. And that comes back to like this, who are you associated with? Right. And so that Google, they look at that and people look at that, right? They want to know, like, is this person credible? And so again, if you have a great idea, even if it is, profound and innovative, or whether or not it's not, if no one has ever heard of you and you just post this on your own blog or on whatever, even if it's like a Medium or something like that, is a little bit of credibility. So at least it gets some visibility. They might read that and like, okay, great, but who is, Solomon Timothy, right? But if they're reading that on Forbes or Inc. or, a marketing specific, CMO or CIO related type publication, it comes in with an inherent level of credibility, right? And that's really the beginning of that thought leadership, is like, not just listen to what I have to say, but you should listen to what I have to say because of my accomplishments, or because of, if Forbes is willing to publish me, like, at least there's a little bit of trust there, right? It's a little bit of like, Forbes itself has the thought leadership kind of persona to it because of who it is. So now you're associated with that. So it's kind of a trickle down effect, but of course still comes to the value of that content. Just because you're on Forbes, like, people know now too, it's, a website like that, like you can get on it, right? It's not like unattainable. So you've gotten the audience, you've gotten your chance. Like now you have to capitalize on it with the value in the content. It'd be no different than, if you were the, keynote speaker at an industry specific event. That's a great way to build thought leadership, position yourself as a thought leader. People are going to show up to the keynote with the assumption that this person, this guy, this girl is an expert, because otherwise they wouldn't be the keynote speaker. But if you fumble now that you've got this opportunity, you're going to lose that credibility. So
you're toast.
That's the balance that you have to have, is find the platform, build the platform, and then provide value. And if you just continue to provide value, that's where you're going to be associated with a thought leader in the space.
Yeah. And as I said, we've evolved because it's not just written content anymore. So now we're doing podcast invites and getting people appearances on places that are not just an article on a website, right? Yep. And we know how many millions we predicted in 2019 that podcast is going to be huge in 2020.
Yeah.
I think that was a 2019.
One of our predictions.
Yes.
I think we were right.
Yeah. And today, you probably become a thought leader faster by being on podcasts than you can on Forbes, because there's just so much more attention being spent on podcasts, right? So I believe that it doesn't matter what the format is or where that is, as long as you are consistently, like you said, putting out valuable content, people are liking it, trusting you, and are willing, to take action on that content, makes you inherently a thought leader.
So what's your opinion in terms of how much of someone's marketing budget or marketing strategy should be allocated towards thought leadership or brand building type activities, right? Because that's really what it is. I mean, we're talking about really your reputation, which is synonymous with your brand. It's the same thing. It's like, how are you perceived? Are you perceived as a leader in the industry? Are you known and trusted before you even walk in the door? Because, oh my gosh, that's, so-and-so who did this and that. Or do you have to work and earn that, in the first call and explain who you are, right? So it's a little bit, unattainable in terms of a metric or, measurable activity there. But like, how much of the budget would you allocate towards thought leadership, and how would you measure that?
I wish there was a magic percentage, like, spend 20% or 15%.
Yeah.
I think you really have to realize if you are at zero, you might need to spend a lot of money and time and energy to really figure out, if I'm going to break into this new industry or become a leader. And every industry is already filled with thought leaders. So how are you going to create more content, more value by doing something small, right? So you really want to I think it's more time than anything else.
Yeah.
In my opinion, because you really have to think hard about what is it that you want to talk about? Where do you want the conversation to be?
Yeah.
And then you really have to invest the time, like showing up on podcasts or whatever. It's not something you can just keep working 40 hours or whatever many hours and then think you're just going to magically become a superstar in your niche. I think you have to invest a lot of time, in my opinion, and preparing for it and doing a good job building relationship and following up on those people so that you can actually leverage those relationships in the future. So it might be a lot of your time and maybe not as much budget, because who's helping you execute it, right? Or it might be, if you had a small budget, you might put all your budget in that because you don't really have the ability to do anything unless it wouldn't make a difference.
Yeah, I look at it as like, you're investing into yourself and your own infrastructure, right? It's really what you're investing into. And I think there's a lot of interesting, almost side effects that happen when you start trying to build thought leadership, because exactly what you just described is like, how much time do you have to put in just to wrap your head around what you're trying to explain, right? And it goes, it's like you don't really understand something until you have to teach it to someone else. Then you figure out all the holes in what you thought you understood. And so once you are able to formulate and articulate your thoughts and explain what you're trying to explain, you force yourself to learn and grow along the way. The other thing is that by doing that and then putting that content out there and then getting feedback, it's like real-time feedback loop of trying to perfect this, not just messaging, but whatever it is that you're trying to solve, whatever your product service is that you're trying to sell. And then the other interesting trend that I've seen that I really like is this idea of thought leadership. It used to be exclusive to like the CEO or the owner of the company, right? It was like, this guy is the face of the company and we're going to push that. I see a lot more people focusing on, their own kind of personal brand and putting out thought leadership content, which now all of a sudden you have employee-led initiatives where if your employees are trying to build their own personal brand, you may think like, well, I want them to build my brand, my company. But if they're promoting your offering, your service offering, or your software, your technology, whatever it is, that's their marketing, right? And if a byproduct of that is that they also build some, kind of career insurance, right? Because now they're seen as a thought leader. But if they're a thought leader and they're partnering with your company, working with your company, it's mutually beneficial. So it's like you're building this marketing engine of, hey, if all my employees are putting content out on LinkedIn, right? It doesn't have to be just the owner. And that takes away from, like you said, it's okay, all this time that has to be invested or budget has to be invested. It's not just ownership anymore. you can have, lower level marketing people that are creating LinkedIn posts or sharing on social media, talking about your product or service, or explaining how, hey, I work on the factory floor, right, at this manufacturing company, but here's a video that I'm posting on YouTube of how we do this, how we handle this process, how we manage, quality control, why this technology saves us, 50% on, time that we used to spend doing this. Like, they're the ones doing the work. They have that industry expertise. They are a thought leader. They just never had a platform before. Now they have platforms. And so it's a crazy new world that we're in the time that we're in. I think it's really beneficial for the companies that are doing it well.
And especially in marketing, I know for a fact that we encourage creation of content, building a following and all of that, because we believe that it helps the brand as much as it helps anything else, right? So we all have a personal brand, whether we know it or not. And I would almost want to say that if you can find the team that you're surrounded by to help create more content, it has so much more viral effect in getting you where you guys are trying to go than just one person pulling it all together.
Right.
It's almost encouraged, in my opinion. I want everybody to have a Twitter account. I want everybody to be an expert. I want everybody to take courses and tweet and create content because, like you said, it forces you to learn. If you're growing, right, and that means you're learning new things and you're innovating whatever it is that your niche is. So I know for a fact that you and I spend quite a lot of time studying our craft and learning things and watching things and executing and trying and testing. Before we come here and make a podcast, we've spent hundreds of hours offline figuring out things for real world businesses, solving challenges, and that's what we bring to the table. And the same exact thing applies, I think, even if it was just somebody writing a blog post. If they're writing a blog post and they're studying the area, they're creating content, they're going to want to tweet that on their own account. It only helps every single person.
Right.
The brand, the CEO, the company, the person.
Right.
But yeah, it is not just limited to the CEO, but like I said, some companies, they don't do that. So the CEO may have to be the one that creates an environment where other people are contributing.
Definitely. Yeah. It has to be top-down initiative. And I think the quality of the content is going to be much better because if the idea is, like you said, the person that's writing a blog is now going to share that blog on their personal social media, or they're going to write a blog about how to write a blog, or they're going to write a blog about something that they're doing at work. For them to, I think the standard is different. Like, this is good enough to post on my work social media account. But if I'm going to share this with my friends and family, like, the standard goes really way higher, right? I get it. So now we're raising the bar for everyone. I think there's really no downside to operating that way. It's all hands on deck. Let's all create content. Whoever is the expert in that particular field of study, they're the ones that should create the content.
And we're calling out the salespeople.
Yeah.
Salespeople, they got to create content for themselves.
Well, the salespeople, I mean, that should really be they're the front line of the company, right? So the more content they can create, and, you might say, well, that's a marketing job or whatever. But again, isn't that beneficial for the salesperson to educate their consumer and position themselves as an expert, so that when they do engage in conversation with a prospect, they're already, up on a pedestal of, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about. I've already watched 10 of his videos on LinkedIn, and, it really resonated with me.
Yeah. And I think I would say if you are a salesperson and if you are talking to your customers, taking phone calls for the company, you want to nurture your prospects. Every time you post something on your own personal LinkedIn, you're nurturing your network. You're nurturing the people that you just connected to, maybe in sales conversations. And that enables you to now be of authority when you speak to them again. Hey, I read this article, or the statistics proves what we do and why we do what we do.
Yeah.
That's so much more ammunition for what it is that you do, right? Yep. At the end of the day, is it going to help you close more deals? Absolutely. Is it going to help the company? Definitely. And if you can now get reshared or retweeted or whatever, it just gives you even more of a platform.
Yeah. So let's summarize in terms of, hey, here's some concrete steps to position yourself as a thought leader and generate some demand. I think it starts with the content, right? Obviously, creating the content. I would recommend building a platform for yourself. which I think is way easier today than it ever has been. You can create your own YouTube channel, whether it's personal or company. You can create a podcast, and you obviously have your own LinkedIn profile page. Those three places where I would develop the platform. Start contributing content, video content, text content. If you have first party data or research that you wanted to turn into some sort of visual, like an infographic, I think that could be beneficial as well. Just focus on providing value. Now, in order to get visibility to that content, that's where we talked about getting other experts or industry kind of influencers, if you will, onto your podcast, onto your platform, or go try to be a guest on theirs and bring something of value to their audience, so that some of their audience would maybe come and listen to you as well. So that's one way. And then the other way is take that same message, take the same approach, and do the same thing, but maybe not in a podcast or a video, but in like a digital publication, an industry specific publication. And then even further traditional would be like an industry event, whether that's an in-person event or a virtual event. If you can get, a speaking opportunity that already brings that level of, I guess, trust, right? With, they must know what they're talking about because they're a speaker and they're a panelist, or they're a keynote speaker at this event. But I think what happens is a lot of times, even to get that opportunity or to get listed in that publication, it's a lot easier if you already have a platform. Like this person, I watched them on these 3 podcasts, so I'm going to invite them to be a speaker because I really liked what they said, right? So as you build this thought leadership, and when you truly do position yourself as a thought leader, so many doors open up for you and so many opportunities open up because you're already known and trusted, and people know what they're going to get, right? And you have a draw to you. So the people, you have a value for me to put you as a speaker for this event because you have a following, and people will buy tickets because you are a speaker. So it takes a long time to get there to that point. But whatever your industry is, whatever your niche is, that should be the goal, is that we are the go-to resource. If someone has a question about whatever industry, for us, it would be if someone has a question about digital marketing or demand generation, I would want them to think about me, think about you, think about One IMS, and come ask us, or come to our website, or come to our podcast and submit a question. And until that happens, until we're the go-to answer, then our job isn't finished.
Correct. And it's technically never finished.
Right. Someone else is coming for it.
And that's probably the final thought, is you got to be consistent.
Yep.
You can't be a thought leader that just disappeared 6 months ago and you're off. You're gone. You can't do that.
In this world. It's, what have you done for me lately? Right.
Exactly. It is when you wake up, check the feed, there's something new popping up. Right. And that's what I believe, it's that frequency of content and that consistency, really what drives that thought leadership. And you're, like you said, you're pushing yourself, you're learning new things, and you're sharing it, and it's a ripple effect. People are going to be like, wow, that's awesome. And that's what you want ultimately. And that gets you the demand that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. Now there's no shortage of demand because they want to get you on the stage. They want to get you to sign the autograph. You might want to write a book, whatever that is.
Right. Those are great ways too, is built to, you could write a book. Here's the other thing I just want to make sure in terms of a takeaway. Like, I want to be very clear that this cannot be faked. You can't fake thought leadership. And just because you were in that publication, or just because you wrote, even if you write a book, anybody could write a book, right? Does anybody buy it? Does anybody like it? Do they read the book and then they say, this guy is just saying things I already know, or like, hey, this makes a lot of sense. So you can fake it, but you're not truly going to build thought leadership or become a thought leader if you're just going through the motions. So don't just focus on the distribution of that content and the visibility. Really focus on providing value, because that's what's going to bring people back. That's what somebody's going to tell. You want someone to tell their friend about, hey, you got to listen to this podcast, or you got to go see this guy talk. Or if you need to know something about, SEO or PPC or digital marketing, you need to go to this blog because these guys know what they're talking about. I get all my information from them. That's what you want to be. You want to be that resource. Yeah.
Love it. That's a good spot to stop. If you're wondering where to start, I'd say start wherever you are in creating a platform for yourself. Use the free channels like Spotify or whatever. Put your podcast out there, YouTube, but focus on what you're delivering, and then consistently promote it through getting people invited or showing up on other people's podcasts, and grow that audience. Would you say it's the first statement?
Yeah.
First thing to do?
Yeah. And don't be afraid, or don't be overwhelmed and think, I don't know enough, or I'm not,
Right. Imposter
I don't
syndrome.
have enough information to start, that's someone else's job. Like, I think if you're thinking that way, it's probably the right way to think. You probably do have enough information. So just start with what you know really well and start talking about it. And ultimately you're going to learn a lot along the way. And that's part of the process. And I think, again, that's probably my favorite benefit of just doing this podcast, is that it really makes us dig deep and think about the way that we approach marketing and do a lot of research to help, our clients, and then ultimately help ourselves to do this type of work.
And we get to rant.
We get that too. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. If you like this episode, please, again, like we said, share it with a friend. If you're thinking about thought leadership, it's a long game. So you want to start early. Don't start, 45 days before you want to be a thought leader. It's going to take a lot of time. So, and if you enjoyed it, leave us a comment, and we'll see you next time.
Growth Marketers is brought to you by One IMS, helping you reach new heights through integrated marketing. One world, one web, one IMS.